Today we're going to be going through the best MMA performances of all time. Okay, I can't cover everything with this list. I might make a part 2 out of this, but I'm going to be ranking these, starting with the worst out of the group to the best performance of all time, in my opinion. Starting with the first one, we got Alex Pereira versus Yuri Prochazka. The reason I have this lower towards the bottom is, it wasn't a 100% just clear domination. Yes, Alex Pereira shut him out on the feet basically everywhere, but there were times where, Alex Pereira was up against the cage, he was getting pressed up, and it was also an early finish. I kind of rate the, long decisions that are clear dominations, like, for example, in Ilia Topuria versus Josh Emmett, where it was a 50-42. But the way Alex Pereira fights, he's a finish-heavy guy. If he's clearly better than you, he's going to knock you out. He's just got that knockout power. He shut down Yuri Prochazka everywhere on the feet. He didn't get hit. He landed on Yuri Prochazka. It was very dominant. That's number 14. Number 13 is Jon Jones versus Shogun Rua. You might be thinking, this is one of the greatest performances ever, and you're not wrong. But the only thing I'll hold this thing back on a little bit is the opponent that was across from Jon Jones. It was Shogun Rua. Shogun Rua, yes, he was a champion. Was he amazing, great fighter? Not really. He wasn't top level competition. It's not like Jones was doing this to Tom Aspinall. Okay, if Jon Jones did this to Tom Aspinall, that would be number 1 on my list. But he dominated Shogun Rua everywhere. He just had a complete arsenal that Shogun Rua was not used to. Shogun Rua was not used to fighting anybody like Jon Jones, whether it was the size or the technique. Jon Jones just literally looked like a different human out there. He looked like a robot, from the future, some alien. He was using techniques that Shogun Rua has probably never even fucking trained in his life. He was hitting it with teep kicks, with knees. The range of Jones was just way too much for Shogun. Shogun is just way smaller than Jon Jones. He couldn't deal with it. He just got completely just thrown around like a little kid. Jon Jones beat his ass. Great performance. The only thing keeping it down a little bit is that Shogun Rua wasn't a modern fighter, big, light, heavyweight. He didn't really have anything that made the fight close. I think a lot of people expected Jon Jones to beat Shogun Rua. It wasn't an upset or a surprise by any means. Number 12, we have Ilia Topuria versus Josh Emmett. This fight was amazing. I watched it live. I don't want to hear people saying I'm a Topuria glazer, okay? This fight is well deserved to be number 12 all time. Ilia Topuria 50-42'd Josh Emmett. 50-42, bro. When do you see that in MMA? Very rarely. Very rarely. Ilia Topuria fucking dismantled a decent contender at featherweight. This wasn't some scrub, okay? Josh Emmett's not a scrub. Yes, he's a brawler. Yes, he throws fucking hooks with his eyes closed and his teeth gritted. But it's still Josh Emmett. Josh Emmett flatlined Bryce Mitchell. Josh Emmett has had good performances. He's a dangerous striker. A lot of people are scared to strike with Josh Emmett. He's fucking got one of the best power in the featherweight division, along with Ilia Topuria. Ilia Topuria dominated this guy everywhere. He dominated him in the striking. He looked quicker. His defense, he was defending everything. He was slipping the punches of Josh Emmett. He was defending the takedowns. He was taking Josh Emmett down. He was 10-8ing him multiple times. The only thing that kept Josh Emmett alive in this is just his heart, just his old veteran heart. He's been through wars and wars and wars, and that's what's kept him in the fight, because he's got the heart of a warrior. And Ilia Topuria, that performance really put Ilia Topuria's name up there with, this guy could beat Volk. After seeing that performance, my prediction was Ilia Topuria to beat Volk. He ended up beating Volk. He ended up knocking out Volk. That performance was like Ilia Topuria's big break. That's what made people really respect him as a top contender, a contender that could challenge Volkanovski. So I think Ilia Topuria is deserving of that number 12 spot. I think that was an insanely impressive performance. One of the most dominant performances on the feet in a 5-round main event in a long time. Number 11 is Sean O'Malley versus Chito Vera. Okay, this was pretty similar. This was just a complete striking domination. Chito Vera had nothing for Sean O'Malley, except for his toughness. He was getting landed on and landed on. He had nothing to give back to Sean O'Malley. The only criticism for this one is that, Marlon Vera was not really deserving of the title shot against Sean O'Malley. It was supposed to be Merab, but there was that whole antics with Merab not wanting to fight for the title because of Aljamain Sterling, his friend. All that stuff. Chito Vera got the title shot because the rematch, there's a whole story behind it, but still, that performance that Sean O'Malley put on, that 5-round performance, was insane. It was great striking performance, great boxing by Sean O'Malley. And Chito Vera just was really had no solution for Sean O'Malley's dynamic striking. Going on to the next performance, this is a hot take, this is controversial, but it makes sense. Jan versus Eljo 1 was one of the greatest performances ever by Petr Yan. Honestly, it's one of the probably the best performance by someone who lost the fight. And it's because Petr Yan didn't really lose the fight. He just lost by disqualification. He lost by a legal knee. There was some sort of communication issue with his corner. He asked if he could knee Aljamain Sterling on the ground. I don't know how he didn't know that rule. I mean, that's a pretty basic rule in MMA. I mean, he's an MMA fighter. He does this for a living. How do you not know that? But his corner basically said, like, yes, or something like that. You can knee Eljo in the face. He kneed Eljo in the face. He lost. But before that, it was an insanely dominant performance. And the thing that really stuck out to me wasn't even the striking, because the striking was so dominant by Petr Yan. You know, the first round, it seemed like Eljo was doing some damage to Yan, but he wasn't really. Petr Yan was defensive the whole time. He was blocking most punches. He was trying to get reads out of Aljamain Sterling. And by doing so, Aljamain Sterling kind of exhausted himself, throwing all this output at Petr Yan, not really landing anything. Towards the end of the first round, Petr Yan lands a huge overhand, knocks Aljamain Sterling on his ass. The second round happened. Petr Yan, by my surprise during the fight, was completely, utterly destroying Aljamain Sterling's takedown attempts. Aljamain Sterling was going for takedowns. Petr Yan was just throwing him around like a toy, literally ragdolling him. He was taking Aljamain Sterling down. He was doing back trips. He was doing throws. He did his Otsugari trip or whatever the fuck, where he tripped him like coming at him. He did that. He was just completely toying with, it was almost like it reminded me of Peyton Talbot versus Cameron Simon for some reason, looking back on it. You know, it was just like so effortless by Petr Yan, just throwing this dude around. He looked like a fucking machine, man. This dude's a computer.
A computer.
Yeah.
Cold-blooded computer.
This dude was making reads the first round, and he got all his data. He got it all initialized. He ran the program. And he just fucked up Aljamain Sterling. He ended up fucking getting disqualified. But that was a great performance. That was more than a great performance. That was one of the greatest performances I've seen. Because Aljamain Sterling, I mean, that win, I'm counting it as a win, aged so well. Aljamain Sterling had a great career for himself. Now he's at 45. Going to a super close decision with Movsar Evloev, top featherweight contender. Next up, we got Justin Gaethje versus Tony Ferguson. I mean, this one nobody should be arguing about. This is one of the greatest performances in modern times. Tony Ferguson, not only was this one of the greatest performances of all time, this is one of the saddest fights of all time. Tony Ferguson got really fucking damaged in this fight, dude. Really damaged. That's how I'll say it. He got damaged, man. I don't know if his soul got damaged. I don't know if his brain got damaged. Probably a little bit of both. But he just got fucking clobbered after clobbered by a Justin Gaethje hook over and over and over again. He was getting caught everywhere. There was a little bit of his success from Tony Ferguson in the end of the second round, I believe, where he lands that uppercut as Justin Gaethje's throwing his uppercut. But other than that might have been the first round actually. Other than that, it was a complete domination by Justin Gaethje, and one of the most damaging, one of the most brutal wins by somebody. I mean, it's kind of like Topuria versus Emmett or Holloway versus Kattar. It's just, they're landing fight-ending shots one after another, but these guys just won't go away. They're just fucking literal zombies who are just eating shots. That's one of the greatest performances, just pure great boxing by Justin Gaethje. That's Justin Gaethje when he has a real game plan. That's Justin Gaethje when he's using his fight IQ, the little bit that he has in a fight. That was Trevor Whitman's genius game planning. You know, that's championship contender Justin Gaethje right there, not Justin Gaethje who's fighting Michael Chandler. That was an amazing performance. Going on to Adesanya versus Costa. This was a really good performance by Adesanya. This was very good for Adesanya's career, because before this, if you remember, it was Adesanya versus Yoel Romero, probably the most boring fight of all time. Like, that was $70 wasted. Adesanya versus Romero was was just horrible. I wouldn't even count that as a title defense for Adesanya. You could have given that to Yoel Romero. I wouldn't have been mad. COVID happens. He puts on the fight with Paulo Costa, a very well-deserving contender. Undefeated Paulo Costa just got off of a win, actually, with Yoel Romero. And he fucking shuts out Paulo Costa. He just shuts him out bad. And I get it, like, that win has aged slightly worse because Paulo Costa hasn't really been the same since. But I think that was because of Adesanya's just brutal confidence stripping of Paulo Costa. It's kind of like Justin Gaethje versus Tony Ferguson, where like, yeah, the Justin Gaethje win against Tony Ferguson like aged bad because Tony Ferguson went on like a 25 fight losing streak. But I think it's because of them. It was because of Gaethje. It was because of Adesanya just completely embarrassing Paulo Costa with the leg kicks, just chewed up his leg. And you just saw the aggressiveness fade away from Paulo Costa after he was just getting his leg chewed up. And then Adesanya finishes him off with a big glancing hook off the side of Paulo Costa's head. And then he finishes him, and then he gets on top of him and fucking dry humps him. So that was just like a big trash talking gone wrong moment, and one of the greatest performances by Israel Adesanya, honestly, in my opinion, because there wasn't a moment where Adesanya was losing. Going on to number 7, we have Volk versus TKZ, the Korean Zombie. Volkanovski versus the Korean Zombie. This was when Volk just like skyrocketed. This was when, you know, this and then the Max Holloway performance. This was, you know, top 5 of all time Volk. And he just completely battered TKZ. The only thing that holds us back a little bit is because TKZ wasn't he wasn't this like terrifying contender. He's been around the block. He's kind of getting old. But the performance that Volkanovski put on, like the striking performance Volkanovski put on, one of the best boxing performances ever. Kickboxing performances too. He was landing great kicks. He just shut out TKZ and battered him into the point that, you know, the referee was just offended at what he was seeing and stopped the fight. So great performance by Volk. I think one of Volk's greatest performances of all time. Next performance I have is Merab Dvalishvili versus Petr Yan. This fight wasn't a domination in the sense that Petr Yan was taking damage, but this was a domination in the sense that Petr Yan has never lost the way he has, 50-45. Merab just showed his cardio. This was when like Merab started to get known for his cardio. Doing that against Petr Yan, just takedown after takedown, literally like attempting, I don't know how much he attempted, like 50 takedowns, genuinely like almost 50 takedowns, I think, against Petr Yan, and Petr Yan had nothing to offer. He was just too exhausted to defend the takedowns. He couldn't land on the striking. Merab was too elusive. And he just completely drained the cardio of Petr Yan. And that's a Merab performance. That's the reason Merab is one of the greatest fighters of all time. Just insane cardio, insane pressure, insane, you know, just mentality to just push that hard. I think that's one of the greatest performances. And it's because of the fact that he did that against Petr Yan. Like, he's not just doing this against somebody with trash cardio and trash takedown defense. Petr Yan has great takedown defense. He has great cardio, and Merab just shut all that out. So yeah, he didn't land a lot of damage, but he decisively beat Petr Yan. Next up, number 5, we have Islam Makhachev versus Charles Oliveira. This was one of the best contender performances against a champion of all time, and especially impressive in the fact that Oliveira was on a tear. He was almost like in talks. People were saying, oh, this guy might surpass Khabib. Oliveira being the GOAT was kind of how people are talking about Islam being the GOAT back then. You know, Oliveira was just running through these guys, Gaethje, Dustin Poirier, Michael Chandler. And Islam Makhachev went in there. He was a favorite, being the contender. Literally, his last performances before that was Bobby Green. And he just shut out Oliveira everywhere. He shut him out in the striking. He shut him out in the grappling. He completely dominated Charles Oliveira. It was shocking to see. And he establishes himself immediately as one of the greatest fighters pound for pound after that. Oliveira genuinely had nothing to offer. Nothing. No submission attempt. No like shitty takedown attempts that didn't really work that much. A little bit of a scramble, not too much. On the feet, Islam Makhachev was putting in work, dude. He was landing. He was quick. He was snappy. He was quicker than Oliveira. His defense looked great. One of the best performances of all time, considering the level that he was doing it against, Charles Oliveira. Number 4, we have McGregor versus Alvarez. This one obviously is one of the greatest performances of all time. This was McGregor going up a weight class. Think about somebody now going up a weight class and putting on the performance Conor McGregor did. It was the most dominant double champ performance we've ever seen in our lives, and probably will ever see. And I get Alvarez wasn't like a Khabib. It's not like Conor McGregor went up and did this to Khabib, but he did it against Alvarez, who was still a really good fighter, one of the best fighters in the world. He was champion, obviously. Conor McGregor shut this dude out. He made him look stupid. There was no threat to Conor McGregor, no threat at all. Alvarez didn't land anything. McGregor was just putting his hands behind his back, dodging everything. He saw everything coming. It was an Anderson Silva-like performance, but it was against an actual champion a great fighter in Eddie Alvarez. And it was a double champ fight too. Like, it was just a legendary performance. And that's like why Conor McGregor is Conor McGregor now, because he put on performances like that. That's deserving of number 4 in my opinion. Number 3, we have Anderson Silva versus Forrest Griffin. And the only thing that's holding this back is Forrest Griffin is just not, it's like Shogun Rua. They're just not like top level fighters in today's age. That's why it's just, you're not seeing performances like Anderson Silva against contenders now, because contenders are just so damn good. The competition's so hard. Like, Anderson Silva's not doing that to DDP. You know what I'm saying? Anderson Silva's not doing that to Sean Strickland. He's not doing that to any of these contenders. But back in the day when, you know, Forrest Griffin was one of the best contenders, Anderson Silva literally looked like he was in the Matrix. He was leaning back, dodging everything, landing punches backwards. Like, that punch he landed on Forrest Griffin was an awkward punch. He was leaning back and punched him with his arm. He literally knocked out Forrest Griffin with an arm punch. Like, he was off balance, fading backwards. And he just caught Forrest Griffin so badly. It was just pure domination. Every strike Anderson Silva threw, it seemed like he landed. Like, he literally seemed like he was 100% with his strikes. I think that, you know, it's going to go down as one of the greatest performances of all time. Next up, we have Cody Garbrandt versus Dominic Cruz. Okay, this is one of the most like notorious best performances. Dominic Cruz, Cody Garbrandt against Dominic Cruz. One of the like highest, quickest peaks of any fighter, because Cody Garbrandt's never looked anything like that in any other fight. He looked insane against Dominic Cruz. I mean, he was just slipping everything, dodging everything. It was one of these top performances. These top performances are like Super Saiyan performances. Like, they're fighting, the fighters that are against them are like in 0.5 speed. And they're basically time traveling. That's how easy it looks for them. They're just seeing everything. Same way Silva was seeing everything Griffin had to offer, Cody Garbrandt was seeing everything Cruz had to offer. He was slipping everything. He was countering it. He was showboating. There was literally no threat from Dominic Cruz for the most part. It was not just like a pure domination like Silva versus Griffin. You know, the striking of Cody Garbrandt in that fight, the defense of Cody Garbrandt in the fight was just spectacular. The showmanship of it, you know, it made it one of the greatest performances because of the, you know, slipping, all the fancy movement, head movement. It just was amazing. Just beautiful to watch. The same goes obviously for McGregor versus Alvarez. It's that same thing where these guys, they literally look unbeatable in the fight. On to the number 1 greatest performance of all time. A lot of you guys might not agree with this, but I'm gonna give it to Holloway in his fight against Calvin Kattar. Yes, Calvin Kattar's not like a champion. He was a mid-level contender, but this is best performances. This isn't clear dominations. This isn't most meaningful wins. This is just best performances. And I thought the performance that Max Holloway put against Calvin Kattar was the craziest thing of all time to watch. I think Holloway versus Kattar is probably one of my favorite fights of all time. Max Holloway literally looked like an alien. You know, this was coming off his second rematch with Volkanovski where he arguably won. And then he goes and puts on a performance like this. And everybody was just like, dude, I think he was probably a favorite going into the Volk fight. He was just unstoppable. And he had like different tools in his arsenal that we've never seen before. When he was throwing those nasty elbows against Calvin Kattar up against the cage, when he was slipping, it was kind of like Cody Garbrandt where he was just slipping and showboating. He was slipping Calvin Kattar's punches, talking to the commentary team, talking out loud while he was beating up Calvin Kattar. It was just a legendary performance. One of the greatest things to watch in UFC MMA history. Holloway versus Kattar, dude. I think when people think of greatest performances, most dominant performances, all that stuff, they think of Holloway versus Kattar. At least the most recent performances we've seen, it takes the cake for me. I think it's just, you know, unlike any other performance when it comes to striking, you know. Calvin Kattar was just soulless at the end of it. Like, we haven't really heard from Calvin Kattar, you know, since then. Like, he's fought, but like, he's just not the same after that. Those are the greatest performances of all time, MMA performances of all time. Let me know what you guys think about this. What do you think is the most impressive performance, the greatest performance in UFC or MMA history? Let me know in the comments below. If you guys like this video, make sure to leave a like, comment, and subscribe. I'll see you guys in the next one.